Hello, everyone. Today we're going to dive back in time and look at professions that were once an integral part of everyday life, but have now completely disappeared. From those who lit the street lamps in the streets to the people who manually set the pins in a bowling alley, these professions today seem like something from another world. In this video, we'll talk about 9 forgotten professions that have disappeared due to technology and progress. Let's go. One of the more fascinating roles to fade into obscurity is that of the lector. In factories of the past, particularly in Cuban cigar factories, and later in places like Ybor City, Florida, lectores were employed to read stories, news, and literature to workers. The practice began in the 1860s, and these readers provided a form of entertainment and intellectual stimulation during long, repetitive work hours. Imagine having someone read aloud to you while you worked, offering not only a distraction, but also a way to stay informed. Lectores weren't just entertainment, they were a cultural fixture. They blended education with amusement, sharing news or novels that might appeal to the workers, making factory floors not just productive, but engaging spaces. However, after the Ybor City cigar makers' strike of 1931, the tradition ended in many places, giving way to modern forms of media and eventually automation. In the age of podcasts, audiobooks, and streaming services, it's hard to imagine a factory worker relying on a lector for entertainment. Yet in its time, this job was an essential part of the workday, a reminder that even today's most essential jobs may one day be seen as relics of a simpler, less technological age. Before literacy was widespread and newspapers were common, the town crier or bellman was the go-to source for news and important public information. These individuals would walk through towns, ringing a bell to capture attention before loudly delivering proclamations, local laws, or market day announcements. In many ways, town criers were the living, breathing precursors to modern-day news anchors and public service broadcasts. In ancient Rome, town criers announced news during market days, which occurred every 8 days, creating an early version of the weekend. Their job wasn't just about shouting announcements, though. In some towns, their duties extended to public reminders, such as the town crier in Goslar, Germany, who urged residents not to pollute the river the day before water was gathered for brewing beer. A unique blend of environmental and civic responsibility. Although the necessity for town criers has long disappeared, their legacy lives on in ceremonies, festivals, and competitions where participants are judged on clarity, volume, and presentation. Interestingly, some modern events, particularly in the UK and Canada, still feature town criers as a nod to the centuries-old tradition. Imagine having your daily news shouted in the street, quite different from scrolling through a news app. The role of the lamplighter reached its height in the 19th century, a time when gas streetlights illuminated cities across Europe and America. Every evening, these men would roam the streets with a long pole, lighting each lamp as dusk fell, and at dawn, they'd return to extinguish them. Their tool of the trade was a pole with a wick for lighting and a small hook to snuff out the flames. But their responsibilities didn't stop there. Lamplighters also carried ladders to replace candles, refill oil, or maintain gas mantles. Lamplighters often provided a reassuring presence in urban areas, offering a sense of security in dimly lit streets. In some places, they even doubled as night watchmen, keeping an eye out for trouble during their rounds. Over time, though, their role became increasingly ceremonial, as cities modernized and electricity took over the job of lighting streets. Interestingly, while the role of the lamplighter has mostly disappeared, a few cities maintain this nostalgic practice for the sake of historical charm and as a tourist attraction. London's Covent Garden, for example, still employs lamplighters to tend to its gas lamps, preserving a link to the past in an otherwise modern metropolis. Before bowling alleys became fully automated, the task of resetting the pins after every throw fell to the pin setter, often referred to as a pin boy. Typically, this job was filled by young boys who needed to be quick on their feet and ready to react in the fast-paced environment of a busy bowling alley. Pin boys had to retrieve and reset the pins manually, a task that required both agility and speed to keep up with eager bowlers. Paul Retzek, a former pin boy, shared in an interview with Scientific American how demanding the role could be. You really had to work fast, or the bowlers would yell at you, "Hey, get moving," he recalled. The job was often grueling, with long hours and very little pay. Yet for many, it was a way to earn some extra money before automated pin-setting machines took over in the 1950s, making this role obsolete. It's strange to think that something as simple as resetting bowling pins once required a human hand. Today, bowling alleys rely on sophisticated machinery to do the job, while the idea of a pin boy has faded into a nostalgic memory of simpler times. Before the convenience of refrigeration, the role of the milkman was indispensable in many households. Milk had a short shelf life, and with no reliable way to store it for more than a day or two, families relied on regular milk deliveries to keep their supply fresh. In the 1920s, milkmen were a common sight in neighborhoods across the country, delivering glass bottles of milk straight to your doorstep. However, as refrigeration became more widespread and grocery stores evolved, the need for daily milk deliveries dwindled. By 2005, only 0.4% of milk consumers in the U.S. received their milk via delivery. Interestingly, recent years have seen a small resurgence in milk deliveries due to the rise of online grocery shopping and at-home delivery services, though it's nowhere near the scale of the early 20th century. Beyond their role as dairy providers, milkmen have become a figure of legend in popular culture, often humorously linked to stories of scandal and mischief. Despite their near disappearance, the milkman remains a symbol of a bygone era where daily deliveries were an integral part of life. In a time before affordable alarm clocks, particularly during the Industrial Revolution, the knocker-up was a profession that ensured people woke up on time for work. The role was especially common in Britain, Ireland, and the Netherlands. Knocker-ups would travel from house to house, using a baton or a stick to knock on doors, waking clients at their desired hour. For those who lived in higher-story apartments, a longer stick, often made of bamboo, was used to tap on upper windows. Some knocker-ups, like the East London worker captured in a 1931 photograph by John Topham, used a pea shooter to strike windows without disturbing the entire neighborhood. Knocker-ups were typically paid a small fee by their clients, just a few pence per week, to ensure they woke on time. While the profession began to fade in the 1940s and 1950s, it persisted in some industrial towns in England until the early 1970s. It's almost inconceivable today to think of relying on a person to knock on your door as your wake-up call, given the ubiquity of smartphones and alarm clocks. Yet for many years, the knocker-upper played an essential role in the daily lives of countless workers. Before the advent of modern refrigeration, keeping food and beverages cold was a significant challenge. Enter the ice cutter, a profession that, while harsh and demanding, was critical for homes and businesses alike. Until the early 20th century, ice wasn't something made in a machine. It was harvested from frozen lakes and rivers. This process, practiced as far back as ancient Greece, Rome, Persia, and China, evolved into a large-scale industry in the early 19th century. Ice cutters would locate thick patches of ice on bodies of water, use saws to carve large blocks, and then haul these chunks to storage facilities, where they were insulated with straw or sawdust for preservation through the warmer months. The work was grueling, carried out in frigid temperatures, and required physical strength and precision. However, as refrigeration technologies improved and became more affordable, the need for manual ice cutting declined. By the mid-20th century, the once thriving ice cutting industry had melted away, replaced by modern appliances that could freeze water on demand. In Europe, especially during the Middle Ages, controlling the rat population was a matter of life and death. Rats were notorious for spreading disease, most infamously the Black Death, which decimated entire populations in the 14th century. Rat catchers were the unsung heroes in the fight against this menace, tasked with protecting both food supplies and public health. These traditional rat catchers often captured rats by hand, employing animals like ferrets or terriers, known as ratters, to assist in their hunt. In many cases, they also set traps or used rudimentary poisons to manage infestations. The job was both dangerous and unsavory, as rat catchers faced potential bites, infections, and disease in the process of their work. As pest control methods evolved, modern techniques like poison baits, advanced traps, and professional exterminators replaced the need for manual rat catching. Today, we have entire industries dedicated to pest management. But the rat catchers of old were essential in keeping rampant disease at bay when scientific solutions were limited. The log driver, or river pig, played a vital role in the timber industry during the 19th and early 20th centuries. Logging was a major operation, especially in remote forested regions with harsh winters. After the trees were felled and cut into large logs, they had to be transported to sawmills, an enormous task made easier by rivers. Log drivers were tasked with guiding logs downstream after they were rolled into rivers in the spring when water levels were high. Armed with long poles, they would walk along the floating logs, ensuring they didn't jam or pile up. Their job was extremely dangerous, as a wrong step could mean being crushed between massive logs or swept away by strong currents. The introduction of railroads, trucks, and modern transportation methods eventually phased out the need for log driving. The profession, once critical to the timber industry, is now largely a part of folklore and legend, with images of men balancing on rolling logs still evoking a sense of adventure and peril. Friends, that's the end of today's story. Thanks for watching and see you in new videos.